Most people believe the moment someone disrespects them, they must respond immediately. They believe silence is weakness. They believe calmness means they lost. So they react fast. They raise their voice. They sharpen their words. They try to win. But watch closely what actually happens. Their heartbeat rises. Their breathing tightens. Their thoughts become messy. And suddenly the other person is no longer controlling the conversation, rather they are controlling them. Think about that for a moment. One sentence from another person, and suddenly your peace disappears. One insult, and your entire mood changes. One careless comment, and now your mind is racing for the perfect comeback. But here is the quiet truth most people never realize. The moment anger controls your reply, you have already lost. Not the argument but yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." The best revenge is not louder words. It is not humiliation. It is not domination. It is composure. And that is exactly what most people do not know how to do. Because when emotions rise, intelligence often leaves the room. Someone criticizes you. Someone mocks you. Someone questions your value. And instantly your mind starts building weapons like arguments, defenses, attacks. But a Stoic mind does something very different. It pauses. It watches. It observes the situation the same way a scientist studies a storm. Not emotionally, but calmly. Because a Stoic understands something most people miss completely. Anger is rarely about the words that were spoken. It is about the person who spoke them. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that truly peaceful people almost never insult others? People who are confident rarely feel the need to tear someone down. People who are fulfilled do not spend their energy trying to provoke strangers. The ones who attack the most are often the ones fighting silent battles inside themselves. Seneca once said, "Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it." In other words, anger always reveals more about the person expressing it than the person receiving it. Yet most people miss this entirely. They take the insult personally. They believe they must fight back immediately. But imagine something different. Imagine someone insults you. They expect you to react. They expect your voice to rise. They expect you to defend your pride. But instead you remain calm. Not forced calm. Real calm. You look at them the way a mountain looks at a passing storm. And in that moment something strange happens. The entire dynamic shifts. Because anger feeds on resistance. Drama feeds on reaction. But wisdom removes the fuel. And when the fire finds no fuel, it begins to die on its own. The Stoics understood this thousands of years ago. Epictetus taught something incredibly powerful. He said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Now think about the power hidden in that idea. Someone insults you. That is the event. But the reaction is what belongs to you. Your reaction is your territory. Your inner world is your kingdom. And the moment you realize this, you become very difficult to disturb. Because now the question changes. Instead of asking, "How do I destroy this person with the perfect comeback?" you begin asking something far more powerful. How do I respond in a way that protects my peace? Because protecting your peace is far more valuable than winning arguments. Arguments drain energy. Arguments waste time. Arguments trap your mind inside someone else's emotional chaos. But wise responses create distance. And distance creates clarity. Which is why the phrases you are about to hear are not insults. They are not clever tricks. They are psychological tools. Quiet tools. Stoic tools. Each one allows you to respond to aggression without becoming aggressive. Each one allows you to remain calm while the other person exposes their instability. And most importantly, each one protects something extremely valuable. Which is your dignity. Before we go deeper, take a moment and think about your own life. Think about the last time someone tried to provoke you. Maybe it was a coworker. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe it was someone online hiding behind a screen. How did you respond? Did you stay calm? Or did their energy infect yours? Be honest with yourself. Because self-awareness is the beginning of strength. And if you want to develop the kind of presence that cannot be easily shaken, you must first see clearly how people try to pull you into their storms. That awareness alone changes everything. Now imagine a different version of yourself. A version of you that speaks less, but speaks with weight. A version of you that rarely reacts, but when you do speak, people listen. A version of you whose silence makes others uncomfortable. Not because you are cold, but because your calmness reflects their chaos. This is what Stoic strength looks like. Not loud. Not dramatic. Quiet. Controlled. Unshakable. And it begins with something extremely simple. A single phrase that completely disarms hostility without raising your voice. A phrase that transforms aggression into awkwardness. A phrase so calm, it forces the other person to look at themselves. The first phrase is simple. Are you okay? Now pause for a second. That question might seem harmless. But psychologically, it is devastatingly effective. Because when someone insults you, they expect resistance. They expect anger. They expect a fight. But when you calmly ask, "Are you okay?" you are doing something unexpected. You are reframing the entire interaction. Suddenly the situation is no longer attacker versus defender. Now it feels like observer versus patient. Think about the emotional shift that creates. Instead of defending yourself, you are expressing concern. Instead of reacting emotionally, you are analyzing their emotional state. And that small shift destroys the script they prepared. They wanted conflict. But now they feel exposed. Because your calm question quietly suggests something powerful. Their behavior is not normal. Their anger is not intimidating. It is concerning. Imagine someone yelling at you in public. Their voice is loud. Their words are sharp. People nearby begin watching. They expect you to respond. They expect the conflict to escalate. But instead, you look at them calmly. You tilt your head slightly. And you say, slowly and sincerely, "Are you okay?" Not sarcastically. Not mockingly. Genuinely calm. Suddenly something strange happens. The emotional energy collapses. Because anger thrives on opposition. But concern disarms aggression. It creates a mirror. And now the person must face their own behavior. They may become quiet. They may become confused. They may even become embarrassed. But one thing is almost guaranteed. The emotional power they thought they had over you disappears. And the reason is simple. You refuse to enter their emotional battlefield. You stayed outside of it. Marcus Aurelius wrote something deeply important in his private journal. When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. In other words, before reacting to others, observe, reflect, and understand. Because often the problem is not the insult itself. It is our attachment to the insult. When you detach, you gain power. And the phrase, "Are you okay?" is a perfect example of that detachment. You are not offended. You are not defensive. You are curious. Calm curiosity is incredibly disarming. And people who expect anger rarely know how to respond to calm curiosity. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever encountered someone who stays calm no matter what happens? Someone who never rushes to defend themselves. Someone who listens more than they speak. Someone whose silence feels heavy. Those people carry a different kind of presence. It is not dominance. It is not intimidation. It is stability. And stability is rare. Which is why it commands respect without demanding it. If this kind of quiet strength resonates with you, take a moment right now and subscribe to the channel. Because this space is built for people who understand that true power does not shout. It whispers. And over time those whispers become something powerful inside you. A mindset. A discipline. A calm that cannot easily be disturbed. Now consider the next layer of Stoic communication. Sometimes the most powerful response is not a sentence. Not even a question. Sometimes the most powerful response is silence. Not passive silence. Intentional silence. The kind of silence that makes people suddenly aware of their own words. Because most people are deeply uncomfortable with empty space in conversation. When someone throws an insult, they expect an immediate reaction. They expect movement. But imagine doing something very different. Someone insults you. You simply look at them. You maintain eye contact. And you say nothing. 1 second passes. 2 seconds pass. 3 seconds pass. That silence begins to grow heavy. And suddenly the person who attacked you feels something unexpected. Uncertainty. Did you hear them? Did they go too far? Why aren't you responding? The human mind hates unanswered signals. It begins filling the silence with anxiety. And that anxiety begins to turn inward. They start questioning themselves. The silence becomes a mirror. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Most people ignore this completely. They rush to respond. They rush to defend themselves. But the Stoic understands something deeper. Not every comment deserves a response. Not every insult deserves your attention. Some words are simply noise. And silence is the cleanest way to let noise pass without letting it enter your mind. But there is a subtle technique here that makes this even more powerful. After the silence, after those uncomfortable seconds pass, you respond with a single word. Anyway. And then you return to what you were doing. Think about what that communicates without aggression. The silence says, "I heard you." But the word anyway says something even stronger. It didn't matter. You acknowledge the noise, but you refuse to give it significance. This combination is extremely powerful. Because people who try to provoke others want emotional reactions. They want proof that their words affected you. But when your silence absorbs their attack, and your calm pivot dismisses it, their emotional weapon becomes useless. Imagine throwing a stone into a deep ocean. The stone disappears. No splash. No ripple. Just silence. That is what Stoic composure feels like to an aggressor. And once someone realizes their words cannot disturb you, their motivation to continue often fades. Because conflict without reaction is exhausting. Seneca once wrote something that perfectly captures this idea. The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Delay your reaction. Delay your response. Delay your judgment. And often you will discover something surprising. The situation was never worth your energy in the first place. But most people never learn this skill, because society teaches the opposite. It teaches us that we must always defend ourselves. That every criticism must be challenged. That every insult must be answered. But think about the cost of that mindset. Your energy becomes scattered across hundreds of meaningless conflicts. You spend your time fighting every barking dog along the road. And when you finally reach the end of the day, you are exhausted. Not from meaningful work, but from pointless battles. Marcus Aurelius warned about this in his Reflections. He wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That sentence carries a quiet power. Because it reminds us of something simple. Your character does not need to be defended constantly. Your actions reveal it over time. People who constantly argue about respect rarely feel it inside. But people who move calmly through life, who do not react to every insult, who do not chase validation, carry a presence that speaks louder than words. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself something honestly. How many arguments in your life have truly improved your life? Not temporarily satisfied your ego. Actually improved your life. Probably very few. Because arguments rarely change minds. They only strengthen positions. The more you fight someone's beliefs, the harder they cling to them. This is basic human psychology. And the Stoics understood it centuries before modern psychology existed. They realized that trying to force someone to change their mind is like trying to force the wind to change direction. You exhaust yourself. But the wind continues anyway. Which leads us to another phrase that quietly dissolves conflict without feeding it. A phrase that completely removes the friction from arguments. The phrase is simple. You're allowed to think that. Now listen carefully to what this does psychologically. When someone challenges your opinion, or criticizes your decision, they expect you to defend yourself. They expect you to argue your point. They expect resistance. But when you calmly say, "You're allowed to think that," something interesting happens. The rope drops. Imagine a tug of war. Two people pulling with all their strength. Both straining. Both determined to win. But suddenly, one person lets go of the rope. The tension disappears instantly. The person still pulling falls backward. Because the conflict only existed while both people were holding the rope. Arguments work the same way. They require two participants. The moment you refuse to participate, the conflict collapses. Now some people misunderstand this. They think saying, "You're allowed to think that," means surrender. But that is not what is happening. You are not agreeing with them. You are acknowledging their right to their opinion. And that distinction is powerful. Because opinions are not facts. They are interpretations. Thoughts. Perspectives shaped by someone's experiences, fears, insecurities, and beliefs. When someone criticizes you, they are revealing their perspective. Not defining your reality. Epictetus taught this principle clearly. He said, "If someone speaks badly of you, do not defend yourself against the accusations, but reply, 'He must not know my other faults, or he would not have mentioned these alone.'" Think about the calm confidence hidden inside that response. It refuses the game entirely. No defense. No anger. Just quiet perspective. And that kind of calmness unsettles people who are looking for a fight. Because your refusal to argue forces them into an uncomfortable realization. They cannot control how you see yourself. Their opinion does not shape your identity. Your identity belongs to you. Now imagine this scenario. Someone criticizes your choices. They say you are wasting your time. They say your plans will fail. They say you are not capable. Most people react emotionally here. They argue. They defend their dreams. They try to prove themselves. But the Stoic approach looks very different. You listen calmly. You allow them to finish speaking. And then you simply say, "You're allowed to think that." And then you move forward with your life. No debate. No anger. No explanation. Just quiet certainty. That response carries a deep message. It says, "My path does not require your approval. My decisions do not depend on your understanding. My confidence does not need your agreement." And that level of self-trust is incredibly rare. Most people rely heavily on external validation. They want others to confirm they are right. They want support. Approval. Agreement. But the Stoic mindset is built differently. It understands that other people's opinions exist outside your control. And anything outside your control should never dominate your peace. Seneca expressed this beautifully when he wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Think about how many times someone's opinion has disturbed you. Not because it changed your life, but because it entered your mind. You replayed it. You analyzed it. You argued with it internally. And slowly it began draining your energy. The Stoic response breaks that cycle. You're allowed to think that. Those 5 words close the door to endless mental debates. They allow you to walk away with your mind still intact. Now let me ask you something important. Have you ever noticed how calm people make aggressive people uncomfortable? Aggression feeds on reaction. But calmness reflects behavior like a mirror. And many people do not like seeing themselves clearly. When you stay composed during conflict, you reveal the emotional imbalance of the other person. And this is where true Stoic strength becomes visible. Not through dominance. Not through clever insults. Through emotional control. Marcus Aurelius once wrote something incredibly useful for moments like this. When another blames you or hates you, go to their souls, penetrate inside and see what sort of people they are. He continues with a powerful observation. You will realize that there is no need to be racked with anxiety that they should hold any particular opinion about you. That realization is liberating. You begin to see criticism differently. You begin to see insults differently. They stop feeling like attacks. They start looking like reflections. Reflections of someone else's fears, frustrations, and insecurities. And once you see that clearly, their words lose their weight. Now pause for a moment. Think about someone who once criticized you harshly. Maybe a teacher. Maybe a boss. Maybe a friend. Maybe even a stranger online. At the time their words might have felt heavy. But now look back at that moment from distance. Did their opinion truly define your life? Or was it simply a passing voice? Most criticism fades with time. But the way you react to it, that shapes your character. Which is why Stoic responses focus less on defeating the other person, and more on mastering yourself. Because self-mastery is the real victory. Now here is something important. Stoicism does not mean you allow people to disrespect you endlessly. Calmness does not mean weakness. Peace does not mean passivity. Sometimes disrespect must be addressed. But it must be addressed without losing your dignity. Without becoming what you are confronting. And that requires a different kind of response. Not emotional. Not explosive. Precise. Controlled. A response that forces the other person to examine their behavior. Instead of simply escalating the conflict. And there is a question that does exactly that. A question so simple, yet so powerful, that it instantly shifts the emotional responsibility back to the person who created the tension. The question is this: did you mean to sound that rude? Or did it just come out wrong? Now notice how carefully that sentence is structured. It does not accuse. It does not insult. It simply asks for clarification. But within that clarification lies a powerful psychological trap. Because the person now faces two possibilities. Either they admit they were intentionally rude, or they admit they misspoke. And most people do not want to publicly identify themselves as intentionally rude, especially in front of others. So the question forces them to pause, to reflect, to reconsider their tone. It activates the thinking part of the brain instead of the emotional part. And that shift changes everything. The conversation moves from emotional chaos to conscious awareness. Now imagine this happening in real life. Someone says something disrespectful during a discussion. The room becomes quiet. People feel the tension rising. Everyone expects the situation to escalate. But instead you respond calmly. Did you mean to sound that rude, or did it just come out wrong? The tone is neutral. Your posture is relaxed. You are not attacking. You are simply asking. Suddenly the person becomes aware of their behavior. They may laugh nervously. They may correct themselves. They may soften their tone. But almost always, the hostility decreases. Because you forced awareness into the moment. And awareness dissolves many emotional reactions. Epictetus taught something deeply connected to this. He said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. In other words, decide the kind of person you want to be before conflict arrives. Because when conflict appears unexpectedly, People reveal their habits. If your habit is anger, you will react with anger. If your habit is calmness, you will respond with calmness. Now imagine this happening in real life. Someone says something disrespectful during a discussion. The room becomes quiet. People feel the tension rising. Everyone expects the situation to escalate. But instead you respond calmly. Did you mean to sound that rude, or did it just come out wrong? The tone is neutral. Your posture is relaxed. You are not attacking. You are simply asking. Suddenly the person becomes aware of their behavior. They may laugh nervously. They may correct themselves. They may soften their tone. But almost always, the hostility decreases. Because you forced awareness into the moment. And awareness dissolves many emotional reactions. Epictetus taught something deeply connected to this. He said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. In other words, decide the kind of person you want to be before conflict arrives. Because when conflict appears unexpectedly, people reveal their habits. If your habit is anger, you will react with anger. If your habit is calmness, you will respond with calmness. This is why Stoicism is not just philosophy. It is training. Daily training. Training your mind to pause before reacting. Training your emotions to slow down before exploding. Training your words to carry intention instead of impulse. And the more you practice this discipline, the more something incredible begins to happen. People start treating you differently. Not because you demanded respect, but because your composure naturally commands it. Calm people make aggressive people look unstable. Controlled responses make emotional reactions look immature. And over time others begin to recognize something about you. You are not easy to provoke. You are not easy to manipulate. You are not easily pulled into drama. And that reputation becomes a shield. A shield built from consistency. Because when people know their insults will not disturb you, many of them stop trying. The fire dies when it finds no oxygen. And that leads us to something even deeper about human conflict. Most arguments are not really about truth. They are about performance. People perform anger. They perform outrage. They perform superiority. And just like any performance, it requires an audience. Remove the audience, and the performance loses its purpose. This realization leads to another powerful Stoic response. One that quietly closes the curtain on unnecessary drama. A response that communicates calm boundaries without hostility. The response is simple. I'm afraid I'm not the audience for this. Now think about the meaning behind those words. You are not calling them wrong. You are not insulting them. You are simply declining participation. You are stepping out of the theater. And once you leave the theater, the performance loses its power. Seneca once wrote something that captures this perfectly. He who is brave is free. True freedom is not physical. It is emotional. It is the freedom to choose your reactions. The freedom to walk away from chaos. The freedom to protect your peace. And the moment you begin using responses like these, your life becomes quieter. Not because conflict disappears, but because you stop feeding it. You stop reacting to every spark. You stop carrying the emotional weight of other people's instability. And gradually something powerful grows inside you. A calm center. A quiet strength. The kind of strength that does not need to shout. The kind of strength that your channel represents perfectly. Power in silence. But there is something deeper happening beneath all of these responses. Something most people never realize. The real goal is not to defeat the person in front of you. The real goal is to remain undefeated within yourself. That distinction changes everything. Because when your goal is to defeat others, you are always pulled into conflict. But when your goal is to remain undefeated inside, you begin choosing your battles very differently. You stop fighting every insult. You stop reacting to every provocation. You start asking a more important question. Is this even worth my peace? Marcus Aurelius wrote something incredibly powerful about this. He said, "You always own the option of having no opinion." Think about the freedom hidden inside that sentence. You do not have to react to everything. You do not have to judge everything. You do not have to argue with everything. You can simply observe. And observation is one of the greatest sources of emotional power. Because the moment you step back and observe a situation instead of reacting to it, you gain distance. And distance reveals truth. For example, imagine someone insulting you. Not calmly criticizing you. Not giving constructive feedback. Actually insulting you. Most people react immediately because they assume something important is happening. They assume the insult must be answered. But if you observe carefully, something interesting becomes clear. Many insults are simply emotional outbursts. They are expressions of frustration, stress, insecurity, pain. And when you understand that, the emotional weight disappears. Because you are no longer dealing with an attack. You are witnessing someone losing control. And when someone loses control, the strongest position is not confrontation. It is stability. Imagine a storm hitting a mountain. The wind screams. The rain crashes. But the mountain does not argue with the storm. It does not fight the wind. It simply stands there. Unmoved. Unshaken. That is the image Stoic philosophy encourages you to become. A calm structure that does not collapse every time the emotional weather changes around it. Epictetus spoke about this kind of strength very clearly. He said, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." Your reactions are in your power. Other people's emotions are not. Your words are in your power. Other people's opinions are not. Your peace is in your power. Other people's chaos is not. Once that understanding becomes real to you, your entire approach to conflict changes. You stop trying to manage other people's emotions. You focus on managing your own. And when you do that consistently, something remarkable happens. You become very difficult to manipulate. Because manipulation always depends on emotional reactions. Someone insults you to make you angry. Someone criticizes you to make you insecure. Someone mocks you to make you defensive. But when those emotional buttons stop working, their influence disappears. And that is when people begin noticing something unusual about you. They notice that you do not respond the way most people do. You do not rush into arguments. You do not raise your voice easily. You do not chase approval. Your calmness creates space. And inside that space, your words begin to carry more weight. This is something many people misunderstand about communication. They believe speaking more gives them power. But often the opposite is true. People who speak constantly dilute their words. But people who speak carefully concentrate their words. Think about someone you deeply respect. Someone wise. Someone composed. When they speak, people listen. Not because they are loud, but because they are intentional. Every word feels measured. Every sentence feels deliberate. And that kind of presence cannot be faked. It grows from discipline. Seneca once wrote something that perfectly captures this discipline. He said, "No man was ever wise by chance. Wisdom is built. Day by day. Reaction by reaction. Conversation by conversation." Every time you choose calm over anger, you strengthen that muscle. Every time you pause before responding, you strengthen that awareness. Every time you refuse to enter pointless conflict, you reclaim a piece of your energy. And that energy is extremely valuable. Because life itself is short. Shorter than most people realize. Think about how many hours people waste arguing online. Arguing with strangers. Arguing with coworkers. Arguing with family members. Defending themselves against opinions that will be forgotten within weeks. All of that energy disappears into noise. But the Stoic chooses something different. The Stoic protects their attention. Because attention is life. Where your attention goes, your life follows. If your attention is constantly trapped in conflict, your life becomes conflict. But if your attention is directed toward growth, purpose, and peace, your life begins to reflect those qualities instead. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of this constantly. In his journal he wrote something that feels incredibly relevant today. He said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Notice the precision of that statement. Power over your mind. Not outside events. Not other people's opinions. Not other people's emotions. Your mind. Your reactions. Your perspective. And when you truly understand that idea, you begin moving through the world differently. You stop trying to control everything. You start controlling the only thing. Now pause for a moment and think about the direction of your life. Not your goals. Not your achievements. Your emotional direction. Are you someone who reacts quickly? Or someone who observes carefully? Are you someone who feels the need to answer every insult? Or someone who understands that silence can be the strongest answer? These questions matter. Because character is built in small moments. Not in grand speeches. Not in dramatic decisions. In small reactions. The way you respond to criticism. The way you handle disrespect. The way you control your emotions when others lose control of theirs. Those moments quietly shape who you become. Epictetus once said something that sounds simple but carries enormous depth. He said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Think about that. Most arguments happen because people cannot tolerate looking foolish. Someone challenges them. Their ego reacts instantly. They defend their intelligence, their pride, their status. But the Stoic is not controlled by that fear. The Stoic understands something liberating. Other people's opinions are temporary. Your character is permanent. And protecting your character is far more important than protecting your ego. Because ego seeks victory. But character seeks truth. And truth rarely needs to shout. It simply stands firm. Just like a rock in the middle of the ocean. Marcus Aurelius described this image beautifully. He wrote, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." Picture that scene clearly. The waves crash. The water roars. But the rock does not chase the waves. It does not argue with the sea. It simply remains steady. Eventually the waves lose their force. And the rock remains exactly where it was. Unmoved. That is Stoic strength. Not loud. Not aggressive. Unshakable. And the 5 phrases you have just explored are simply tools that help you practice that strength in everyday life. They are reminders. Reminders that you do not need anger to respond to anger. Reminders that calmness can dismantle aggression more effectively than shouting. Reminders that silence often communicates more wisdom than long arguments. Because wisdom speaks slowly. But its impact lasts much longer. So the next time someone insults you, pause. Remember the mountain standing through the storm. Remember the rock standing against the waves. And remember this quiet truth Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself nearly 2,000 years ago. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Do not become what hurt you. Do not mirror chaos. Do not mirror anger. Become something stronger. Calm. Controlled. Unshakable. Because real power does not come from dominating others. It comes from mastering yourself. If this message resonated with you, if you are someone who believes that real strength is built in silence, then you are exactly where you belong. This channel exists for people who are tired of noise. People who are tired of unnecessary conflict. People who want to build a mind that remains steady no matter what the world throws at it. So if you haven't already, subscribe to Stoic Quiet Strength. Because here we practice a simple idea. Power in silence. And the more you practice it, the more you will realize something remarkable. The calmest person in the room often holds the greatest power. There is another layer to this that most people never stop to consider. It is easy to talk about calmness in theory. It is easy to imagine staying composed when listening to philosophy. But the real test comes in the moment when someone speaks to you with disrespect. In that moment your heart may beat faster. Your thoughts may rush forward. Your pride may whisper that silence means weakness. And this is exactly where Stoic practice begins. Not in books. Not in quiet reflection alone. But in real conversations where your emotions are tempted to take control. Because philosophy only becomes powerful when it enters your behavior. Seneca once wrote something that sounds almost like advice from a mentor speaking quietly beside you. He said, "How much more harmful are the consequences of anger than the causes of it?" Think about that. The insult itself is usually small. A sentence. A tone. A careless remark. But the reaction to that insult can create consequences that last much longer. Friendships end. Opportunities disappear. Respect fades. All because someone reacted without thinking. Anger makes decisions that wisdom would never approve. That is why Stoicism trains patience. Because patience creates space. And inside that space, intelligence returns. Imagine a situation where someone tries to embarrass you in front of others. Maybe they make a sarcastic comment. Maybe they question your ability. Maybe they try to make the room laugh at your expense. Most people panic internally when this happens. Their mind races to defend themselves. But a Stoic mind approaches the moment differently. Instead of reacting immediately, it slows down. It notices the emotional energy in the room. It observes the person speaking. It recognizes the motivation behind the behavior. Is this person seeking attention? Are they trying to impress others? Are they projecting their insecurity? Once you see these motivations clearly, the insult loses much of its power. Because you are no longer interpreting it as truth. You are seeing it as behavior. Behavior can be understood. And once it is understood, it becomes easier to respond wisely. Marcus Aurelius practiced this kind of thinking constantly. He often reminded himself that people act according to what they believe is right. Even when they are wrong. He wrote, "Whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question: what fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I am about to criticize?" This reflection does something very important. It softens your judgment. Instead of reacting with anger, you begin reacting with understanding. Not because you approve of disrespect, but because you understand that imperfect people behave imperfectly. And once you understand that clearly, you stop expecting perfection from others. Which removes a huge amount of frustration from your life. Because many arguments happen when we expect others to behave exactly the way we would behave. But people are different. Their experiences are different. Their emotional control is different. Their awareness is different. So when someone speaks without thinking, the Stoic response is not immediate outrage. It is observation. Observation creates wisdom. And wisdom creates better responses. Now imagine again the moment when someone tries to provoke you. You hear the comment. You feel the emotional spark. But instead of reacting instantly, you breathe. You pause. And in that pause you remember something important. This moment will pass. This conversation will end. This insult will be forgotten. But the way you respond will remain part of your character. Epictetus once explained this idea very clearly. He said, "Remember that it is not only the desire for wealth and power that makes people slavish and submissive, but also the desire for tranquility and leisure." In other words, people often sacrifice their dignity just to feel comfortable in the moment. They react quickly to protect their ego. But the Stoic protects something deeper than ego. The Stoic protects integrity. Integrity means your behavior remains consistent with your values even when emotions try to pull you away. And when you live with that consistency, something remarkable happens. You begin trusting yourself more. You trust that you will handle situations wisely. You trust that you will not betray your principles for temporary satisfaction. That kind of self-trust builds quiet confidence. Not arrogance. Not pride. Confidence rooted in discipline. Now think about someone you admire deeply. Someone calm. Someone wise. Someone who never seems shaken by criticism. That person probably did not develop that composure overnight. It likely took years of learning. Years of observing themselves. Years of correcting their reactions. Every moment of patience became part of their character. And the same process is available to you. Because character is not fixed. It is shaped by repeated choices. Every time you choose calmness over anger, you strengthen that habit. Every time you choose silence over argument, you strengthen that discipline. Every time you choose understanding over judgment, you strengthen that wisdom. And slowly your mind becomes quieter. Not empty. Clear. Clear minds respond better than crowded minds. Clear minds see situations more accurately. Clear minds make better decisions. Seneca often reminded his students that the greatest victories are internal victories. He wrote, "The greatest power is often simple patience." Patience is not passive. It is controlled strength. It is the ability to remain steady while others lose balance. And this kind of steadiness changes the way people experience your presence. Imagine entering a room where everyone is arguing. Voices are raised. Emotions are heated. But one person remains calm. That calmness becomes noticeable immediately. People sense it. Sometimes they even begin calming down themselves. Because calmness spreads just as easily as anger. But someone has to introduce it. Someone has to hold it. And that person becomes the anchor of the room. The steady point around which everything else moves. Marcus Aurelius spent his life practicing this mindset while leading an empire. Imagine the pressure he faced. War. Politics. Betrayal. Endless criticism. Yet he reminded himself daily that emotional discipline mattered more than external success. He wrote something that feels like advice directly to us. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. At first that sentence may sound strange. But look deeper. Many emotional wounds are created by interpretation. Someone says something careless. We interpret it as an attack. We replay it. We give it meaning. But if we choose not to interpret it as harm, the emotional wound never forms. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means choosing your interpretation wisely. Because interpretation shapes emotion. And emotion shapes reaction. And reaction shapes destiny. So if you want to live a life with less chaos, fewer pointless arguments, and greater peace of mind, the practice is simple. Slow down your reactions. Observe more. Speak less. And when you do speak, let your words come from clarity instead of impulse. That is where the 5 phrases explored earlier become powerful tools. They give your mind a structured response when emotions rise. They remind you to remain calm. They create space for wisdom to enter the conversation. But beyond those phrases lies an even deeper principle. You do not need to respond to everything. Sometimes the strongest action is simply continuing with your life. Think about how much emotional energy people waste defending themselves against strangers. Against critics. Against people who will never understand them anyway. That energy could be invested somewhere far more valuable. Your growth. Your goals. Your peace. Epictetus understood this clearly. He taught that life is like a journey. And along that journey you will encounter many distractions. Arguments. Opinions. Conflicts. If you stop to fight every single one, you will never reach your destination. But if you keep walking, the noise fades behind you. Your progress continues. And eventually the distance between you and the noise becomes enormous. So the real question becomes this: what deserves your attention? What deserves your energy? And what deserves your silence? Learning to answer those questions wisely is one of the greatest skills a person can develop. Because life becomes much simpler when you stop reacting to everything. Now imagine your future self. A version of you who has practiced this discipline long enough that calmness becomes natural. Insults no longer disturb you. Criticism no longer shakes you. Arguments no longer tempt you. You listen. You observe. You respond only when necessary. And when you do respond, your words carry quiet authority. Not because you are trying to dominate others, but because your calmness shows that you dominate yourself. That is the essence of Stoic strength. And it perfectly reflects the idea behind this channel. Stoic quiet strength. Power in silence. If you found value in this message, take a moment to subscribe and stay connected. Because the journey toward emotional mastery is not a single lesson. It is a lifelong practice. And every conversation is an opportunity to practice it. Every insult is an opportunity to test it. Every moment of tension is an opportunity to strengthen it. The world will always contain noise. People will always argue. Criticism will always exist. But you do not have to become part of that noise. You can become something else entirely. Calm. Clear. Unshakable. A quiet strength that stands steady while the storm passes. And the more you practice that mindset, the more you will understand something Marcus Aurelius discovered long ago. The mind that masters itself becomes stronger than any insult, any argument, or any opinion the world can throw at it. That is real power. And it grows in silence. There is one more truth about anger that most people never realize. Anger is rarely spontaneous. It is often a performance. Think about how a child behaves during a tantrum. The child screams. They cry. They kick the floor. But something interesting happens the moment there is no one watching. The performance fades. Because the emotional display was never truly about the problem. It was about the audience. Adults are not very different. When someone raises their voice, insults you, or tries to provoke you in public, they are not just expressing emotion. They are performing emotion. They want the reaction. They want the energy. They want the drama to grow. And if you give them that reaction, you become part of the performance. You become the second actor on their stage. But Stoicism teaches something different. You do not have to accept the role someone assigns to you. Someone might invite you to a fight. But you are not required to attend. Imagine someone shouting at you during a disagreement. Their voice is loud. Their gestures are dramatic. They are waiting for you to respond the same way. But instead you remain calm. You look at them quietly. And you say something simple. I'm afraid I'm not the audience for this. Notice what this sentence communicates. It does not insult them. It does not escalate the conflict. It simply removes you from the performance. You are not participating. And without participation, the drama collapses. Seneca once warned about the contagious nature of emotion. He wrote, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you." Why? Because emotions spread. Anger spreads. Panic spreads. Fear spreads. But calmness spreads as well. When one person refuses to react emotionally, the emotional momentum in the room begins to slow. It loses speed. It loses intensity. And eventually the entire situation cools down. This is why the Stoics valued emotional discipline so highly. Not just for personal peace, but for influence. A calm person changes the emotional temperature of every room they enter. Imagine someone trying to provoke you during a conversation. They repeat accusations. They exaggerate problems. They raise their voice to create pressure. But you respond slowly. Your voice stays steady. Your words remain simple. That contrast becomes visible to everyone present. People begin noticing the difference. One person is emotional. The other is composed. One person is chaotic. The other is controlled. And over time that contrast shapes how people perceive both of you. Marcus Aurelius understood this dynamic deeply. He reminded himself constantly not to mirror the behavior of those around him. He wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Notice the wisdom in that sentence. Most people mirror the behavior they receive. Anger meets anger. Insults meet insults. But the Stoic breaks that pattern. Instead of mirroring chaos, they introduce calm. Instead of reflecting hostility, they reflect stability. And stability has a strange effect on aggressive people. It exposes them. Because when someone is angry and the other person remains calm, the anger begins to look irrational. Uncontrolled. Unnecessary. And that realization often causes the aggressor to slow down. Not because you defeated them, but because they suddenly see themselves clearly. Epictetus believed this kind of emotional control was the foundation of freedom. He said, "No person is free who is not master of himself." Freedom is not about controlling other people. Freedom is about controlling your reactions. When someone insults you and you react immediately, you are not acting freely. You are reacting automatically. They pressed a button and you responded. But when someone insults you and you pause, observe, and choose your response carefully, that is freedom. You are no longer controlled by their behavior. You are guided by your principles. And the more you practice this discipline, the stronger it becomes. Eventually something interesting begins to happen. You stop fearing insults entirely. Because you realize they cannot control you. You stop worrying about criticism. Because you know it cannot define you. You stop feeling the need to defend yourself constantly. Because your character speaks louder than arguments. Seneca once wrote something that perfectly captures this mindset. He said, "He who is brave is free." But bravery in Stoicism does not mean physical courage. It means emotional courage. The courage to remain calm when others expect anger. The courage to remain silent when others expect defense. The courage to walk away from pointless conflict even when your pride whispers that you should stay. That kind of courage is rare. But it creates something powerful. Peace. Not temporary peace. Lasting peace. Because the more control you gain over your reactions, the less control others have over your life. Imagine waking up each day without carrying the weight of yesterday's arguments. Without replaying insults in your mind. Without feeling the need to prove yourself to every critic. Your mind becomes lighter. Clearer. Stronger. And that clarity allows you to focus on what actually matters. Your growth. Your purpose. Your character. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself of how little time humans truly have. He wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." Think about how many people spend their lives trapped in endless arguments. Defending themselves against opinions that will disappear in weeks. Reacting emotionally to strangers they will never meet again. All of that energy disappears into noise. But the Stoic chooses a different path. The Stoic invests energy where it creates value. In discipline. In learning. In self-control. In building a mind that cannot be easily shaken. And once that mindset develops fully, something remarkable becomes visible. Your silence becomes powerful. Not empty silence. Intentional silence. The kind of silence that communicates confidence. The kind of silence that shows you are not desperate for approval. The kind of silence that makes people pause before speaking carelessly around you. Because they understand something about you. You are not easily provoked. You are not easily manipulated. You are steady. And steady people command respect without demanding it. Now imagine living with that level of emotional control. Imagine someone insulting you and feeling nothing but curiosity. Imagine someone criticizing you and simply observing their perspective. Imagine someone trying to provoke you and realizing their effort failed completely. That is the quiet freedom Stoicism offers. Not a life without conflict, but a mind that remains steady within it. And once you develop that steadiness, something even deeper happens. You begin influencing others without trying. Your calm responses become examples. People notice how you handle tension. They notice how rarely you argue. They notice how you refuse to feed drama. And some of them begin asking themselves a question. How do they stay so calm? That is the quiet influence of Stoic strength. It teaches without preaching. It demonstrates without boasting. It simply exists. Marcus Aurelius spent his life trying to become that kind of person. Not perfect, but disciplined. Not emotionless, but controlled. And in his private reflections he left us a reminder that feels just as powerful today as it did 2,000 years ago. He wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That principle simplifies life. If an argument requires dishonesty, avoid it. If a response requires cruelty, reconsider it. If a conversation requires anger to continue, it is probably not worth continuing. Choose clarity. Choose discipline. Choose silence when silence carries more wisdom than words. And remember this. The strongest person in the room is rarely the loudest. It is often the calmest. The one who listens more than they speak. The one who cannot be easily provoked. The one who understands that true power does not shout. It stands quietly, unshaken. Just like the rock Marcus Aurelius described. The waves crash. The wind roars. But the rock remains steady. And eventually the storm passes. If this message resonates with you, and if you believe that strength is built through discipline, reflection, and calm thinking, then you are exactly where you need to be. This channel exists for people who value clarity over noise. Wisdom over ego. Calm strength over loud reactions. So if you want to continue developing that mindset, subscribe to Stoic Quiet Strength. Because here we practice something simple but powerful. Power in silence. And the more you practice it, the more you will discover something incredible. The quieter your mind becomes. The stronger your presence grows. And when your presence becomes strong enough, you no longer need to prove your wisdom. People can feel it the moment you speak. Or the moment you choose not to.